Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast, brought to you by Join Cycling for our first monument preview of the season, and for the first time ever, both men and women's editions in the same preview. Milano-Sanremo. Season's just started, and we're already here with monuments. It's crazy. From Pavia to Sanremo, of course, the route for the men has not changed, 291 kilometers long. The main climb, the longest climb they do is the Passo del Turchino, 140 k's in. Then they begin the 3 or 4 capos, Capomeli, Capocervo, Capoberta, which is about 1.5 k's at 6%. That's they begin about 70 k's from the finish, 60 k's from the finish, then end about 45 k's from the finish. Then the 2 climbs everybody knows, the Cipressa, which is every time I look at it every year, I'm like, that's not as hard as I thought. 5.6 k's at a measly 4%. With the first 4 Ks actually being the only ones at about 4.5%, 5%. And then these are a quick descent, about a 10K flat section, and then the Poggio di Sanremo, which also 3.6 Ks, 3.7%, with about a 500 meter, 6% section where Julian Alaphilippe always attacked actually, before a quick descent where many have won in the past, and then 3 Ks of flat on the Via towards the Via Roma for the flat finish in Sanremo.
Looking at these 2 climbs, we have the fastest times of the last couple of years written down here on the notes, and I want to talk about it for a second. The fastest Cipressa time is actually from the 1990s, which was 1996, 9 minutes 19. We have not seen a faster Cipressa since then. Then again, it was a bit of a silliness going on with motorbikes and so forth in that year. I counted about 7 motorbikes.
That wasn't the only problem.
That wasn't the only problem, but there were at least 7 motorbikes in front of that man. So I can ride a bit faster on the Cipressa like that as well, to be honest.
Can we get a word on that?
Yes.
Pantani, such a legend, whatever. Pantani would attack. They would literally put 7 cars around him and 8 motorbikes literally in front of him. It's like, of course he rode fast.
He got like a personal convoy up the climb.
Yeah.
It's like a president. Anyway.
It legit looks like that.
Last year, we had about 9 minutes 30 was the time from the first group on the Cipressa, which, if you don't remember, UAE set some tempo on the climb with the likes of Isaac Del Toro and then Tim Wellens afterwards. And then they kind of said, okay, we've only got 2 riders in position, so this won't be working. And the tempo dwindled a little bit towards the top. So 9 minutes 30. I believe UAE can go faster than that, but we'll get to that in a second. The other climb, of course, you mentioned it, Poggio di Sanremo. The fastest Poggio was actually last year with Pogacar and Van der Poel, 5 minutes 38. And the year before was the second fastest Poggio, Mathieu Van der Poel, 5 minutes 40. And then before that, I think it was like 1990s as well. So these are the last 2 years were the fastest Poggio. So it wouldn't shock me if this year also shows up and suddenly in the top 3 Poggios of all time in terms of speed. But we've spoken about the parkour is the same as always. But will the way the race play out be the same as always? Because we've had this constant discussion over the last couple of years. While we see on TV every single year the Poggio being the ultimate final when it comes to this race, the one that defines everything in the end, there's always this hint of Pogacar Cipressa, Pogacar Cipressa, Pogacar Cipressa in the rumors around the world. And even Tim Wellens in the press day at the start of the year was mentioning that UAE might want to do the Cipressa under 9 minutes, and in doing so making it as hard as possible, potentially making a bit of a Pogacar launch possible. But first of all, before we begin, do each of us believe that attacking on the Cipressa could work?
No. It can't work.
Okay.
So
why?
Because Pogacar, in theory, could get a gap. He could.
Yeah.
But how big is that gap? Not that big. Let's say he gets, by the end of the descent, let's say he gets 10 seconds. Yeah. 10 seconds. That's big. That's a big gap. He has to do the whole flat section against Ganna, Van der Poel, Pedersen, you name it, Vacek. It's not like 50 riders will drop. It's not like Zurich where they've just done 7 laps of a hard climb and steep pinches and accumulated climbing. Yeah, they've got the capo, but the peloton's not just like on their knees the minute he attacks, even if he does get separation.
And if we then look at last year, which was a Cipressa of 9 minutes 30, relatively fast, I would say that there were still roughly 40, 45 people on top in the first group. If you think that and you think, okay, let's say UAE can bring it down to 9 minutes, it's still not going to be Pogacar alone in my head. I believe that there's multiple riders in the peloton that can follow Pogacar if he attacks on the Cipressa right now. Because if he attacks on the Cipressa, we're talking about the last kilometer and a half of the climb, because the rest will be spent pacing by his team. Then we're talking about 2.7% gradient in the last K and a half on the Cipressa. Good luck attacking away from Pedersen, from Ghana, from Mathieu van der Poel on a 2.7% gradient. So unless it's like a surprise attack, which it's not a surprise if you pace the whole climb, then I don't see it happening. But what went wrong with UAE on the Cipressa last year? Because positioning was the problem, right?
Yeah, no one entered in good position. And the key is to start. I mean, it is the only way it's possible is if UAE start as a whole team, first wheel in the bottom.
Yeah. They
do a full lead out, like in training, and Ganna's out of position, possible. Pedersen's out of position. But I mean, it's unlikely every top favorite's out of position. But that's the only way is if, and then there's a split, is if they sort of split it somewhere at P10, and then those guys have to close a gap or something. It's easier said than done to enter Cipressa as a whole team in first position.
Exactly, and I truly believe that if UAE is very well positioned at the front of the peloton going into the Cipressa, they can beat 9 minutes, maybe even 8:45. I think it's possible if you have a full team at the front of the peloton going into that. But you said it, it's difficult to do that. Last year, they didn't have a flat ruler to put their team into a position, and if we take a look at their team from this year,
we'll do betting favorites.
Ooh, you want betting favorites? I'll give it to you first.
We'll just run through the favorites. So Pogacar, who we've spoken about, of course, he is indeed the favorite, $3.25. Just ahead of Van der Poel, $4. Pedersen, $5.50. Van der Poel odds surprising to me, actually. I see a much clearer path to victory for Van der Poel than Pogacar. Ghana, $8. Philipsen, $10. Last year's winner, of course. Johnny Milan, $15, but despite being dropped on the start of Cipressa last year. Pidcock, $17. He attacked in the last 2 kilometers last year. Michael Matthews, $21. Morris, former winner, $23. Olav Koy, $26. Biniam, $34. Van Gils, who I feel like I haven't seen for a while, $34. Yeah. Magnus Cort, who now has learned how to ride one-day races at UNOX, $51. Caden Groves, $81. I dare say that might have shortened after a certain crash yesterday, which we'll talk about. Sturven, $81. Pithy, $81, who we haven't seen since Australia. Presume he's been on the mountain. Narvaez, $81. Bettiol, $126. And the last former winner is Julien Alaphilippe, $151.
About that list, I have the same feeling as you. I'll get my opinion out of the way straight up. I do not have Tadej Pogacar as a favorite. I believe 100% that Pogacar can win this race in certain scenarios, but Mathieu van der Poel is definitely the favorite for me.
Yeah, I think so. Like Alpecin, they have it. They have the whole package. They got positioning. They've got the fastest classic sprinter. They have Gianni Vermeersch, who will survive Cipressa no problem because he's only like 67 kilos, I think. They have just the whole package. He's got the explosivity to react immediately to Pogacar's wheel. He made a mistake. Last year, Van der Poel made a mistake, which I'll run through.
Okay.
He's got the descending. And I also think right now, I see no way Pogacar can beat him in a sprint. Already Van der Poel dusted him in the 2022 RVV sprint, and I think the gap is bigger now.
I agree with you in that. I also see Mathieu van der Poel as the better sprinter of the two, and that brings me into strategies from both teams as well, but I want to bring it back for a second to what I was going to talk about, because I think it's important here, because we got to talk through the scenarios that could occur in this race to see how UAE will try something, how Alpecin could potentially react to that. When it comes to the roster of the team, of UAE Team Emirates, we see a change from last year. And we see the following team lined up when it comes to UAE Team Emirates. Obviously, Tadej Pogacar, but next to him, Isaac Del Toro seems to be the replacement for McNulty, who was originally on the preliminary start list. Johnny Narvaez, Toman Novak, and Tim Wellens, the usual climbing squad around Pogacar to hard pace one or two of these climbs. But then Vegard Starke-Langen and Niels Pollitt. I think if you look at those two riders, I think first of all, Langen will most likely have to relay at the front of the peloton for a lot of the race, because Pogacar is seen as one of the two favorites of this race, you know? So it's not like they can save both of them fully to position into the climbs, right?
Well, yeah, they have to. That's probably why they bring Langen, is to control the breakaway, because everyone's going to look at Pogacar and someone has to do it. I guess they use Novak to pace the capo climbs to bring in some fatigue. And it's going to be a tailwind on the weekend, so maybe it's harder to control the break than normal. But yeah, I really don't understand this team. Like, we saw in Paris-Nice, Pollitt can't ride in the peloton. And if it's wet, he especially can't. Like, he's not going to do it. He's not going to be in position. He's scared on the descents. Like, I really don't understand why Pollitt's in the team instead of Rui Oliveira. If you want to be first into Cipressa, it's not like Rui Oliveira ain't a pancake. He can pace the first 700 meters on 4% hard.
Yeah.
And yeah, because like in theory, if you looked at the power data, I'm sure Niels Pollitt can pull on 5% really, really, really hard.
Yeah.
He isn't like in it. Yeah, we've seen it. But Rui Oliveira positions better, or Ivo Oliveira. So I was really surprised. And not to see Vermeersch either. Vermeersch also for positioning and also can pull on 5% really, really hard. So it's going to be all down to Cipressa's going to be, if Pollitt's not there, and Narvaez, I don't know, is Narvaez going to be in position either? Or like last year, she was P15.
Ulisi was in Narnia.
He wasn't pulling. I don't know. It's good. I can really see a situation like last year where Del Toro is going to be in position, pulls, and then they're like, fuck, are we going to use Tim Wellens when he's the Poggio lead-out guy? And they stopped last year.
I'm not sure I'm as bearish on the team as you, but I agree that I'm not confident in Pollitt when it comes to the positioning going towards the Cipressa, because that's the one we're pointing at. Yes, the copy are there. Last year they did pace on the copy with multiple riders to try and, I think with one rider actually, to try and put some fatigue into the riders before the Cipressa even started. But then they were gone before the Cipressa started. You said it, and eventually it led to only two riders being in position enough to do something on the Cipressa, and they weren't even perfectly in position. Those two riders, they had to come up in the first 500 meters as well. In doing so, delaying their actions on the Cipressa. So it's the positioning for Cipressa will be important, and their Cipressa plan lives or dies based on that. Because if you're not in position, it will never work. If you are in position, then you can make it work. And I'm not super confident that Pollitt can deliver that, in my personal opinion. If he does, we'll be seeing some kind of spectacle. But even if he does, I still don't believe that a full lead out of UAE can lead to just Pogacar going solo over the top.
No, I don't. And say he goes with Van der Poel and Pedersen, I don't see why they would ride with him. Why would you?
That's the thing. Let's talk about the reactions of other teams. Hypothetically, UAE goes all out on the Cipressa, brings it to 8 minutes 53. Perfect time, right? In doing so, Pogacar tries to attack in the last kilometer of the Cipressa. We see in his wheel, Mathieu van der Poel, Pedersen, Ganna, whatever. We take a look at those three riders. If you're Mathieu van der Poel, technically, you've got Philipsen in the group behind. We don't know what his shape is going to be like. Yes, true. Or Groves, because Philipsen ended up crashing in Nokere Koersen yesterday. Now, going over the top there, Van der Poel's probably not going to ride because argument one, Philipsen is behind. Argument two is, if I'm Van der Poel, I would rather make this two puncher efforts versus one long effort.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah, why would he want to ride on-off threshold for 13 minutes between Cipressa Poggio with Pogacar? Who does that benefit? Extending it to a 30-minute effort. Doesn't benefit him.
And I would like to add, though, that I have a different opinion after the Poggio. If Pogacar and Van der Poel go a duo over the Poggio, I think Van der Poel should actually ride this year. Even if Philipsen is behind without Milan?
Yes. Philipsen nearly lost the sprint last year. Like he
lost
also
in Kuurne.
Yeah.
Omloop.
So a sprint is never a guarantee, and whereas Van der Poel head to head, you'd hope he would win. And Ganna, I think, would ride because actually he's the one that suffers positioning maybe into the Poggio. You make it a small group, backs his strength. We also saw in Tirreno Adriatico that he has no problem producing power for 20, 25 minutes. So if I was Ganna, I'd ride, but it takes one guy sitting on. If one superstar sits on, you're not going to tow them for 10 kilometers to the Poggio. Yeah. You're just not going to do it. So we'll see. I mean, I hope he goes. I hope he goes on Cipressa to change the race. If there's anyone that's going to do it, it'd be Pogacar. What I think will happen is, still Narvaez and Wellens to launch him on Poggio on the steep sections, very, very strong. And it's still a very, very good team. I mean, maybe Benji... Maybe we could see Narvaez surviving and Pogacar doing the Van der Poel role to lead out Narvaez for the sprint. I don't see it.
The likelihood of a better sprinter being in the group with Narvaez is significant, in my opinion. Van der Poel, better sprinter than Narvaez, in my opinion.
Yeah, there'll be someone like... There's always somebody. Alpecin de Koenig, their lineup is Murso, Riesebeek, Vermeers, Dillier, Groves, Philipsen. So it's a good support around Van der Poel.
Yeah.
They have, I would expect Groves, to be a natural for Sanremo. Philipsen won last year, of course. And they'll position well into the Cipressa. So they have a sprint option and a punchy option. So that's pretty good, as always. Ineos bring Pippo Ganna, who's in great shape. Tobias Foss, Connor Swift, Thomas, Ben Turner, Swift, Ben Swift, that is. And Axel Laurence Kwiatkowski, who's normally here. He has a inflamed knee, so he can't start. But you can see Ineos roster construction, Benji. It is like rouleur territory. They are here to position Ganna. And then maybe Laurence survives. He's also a prospect for the future for this race. And they have a sprint option coming back, but it's all about Ganna and getting him into position. And so, strong team.
I think a lot of people might have reacted to this team and said, I love this team. Ganna is there, blah, blah, blah. But around him, Tarling was great at Paris, right? Sheffield was great at Paris, right? They fit perfectly in MSR, right? And on one end, I fully agree. I would have loved to see Tarling in this race. I would have loved to see Sheffield in this race. I think the reality is most likely that Ineos had pre-planned a certain schedule for these riders, and they're doing well in that schedule, and they don't necessarily want to divert from that schedule last minute to appropriate Milano-Sanremo. Is that a justification, or are they too stuck in the preset schedule?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Tarling long rides is no problem for him. I think he would survive. So yeah, Tarling would have been interesting to see. I don't know what his next race is. Maybe he's preparing, to win. You can't do it all. You can't do it all, and
classics?
maybe he's preparing for the other classics. But they got experience. Ben Swift has done Sanremo 10 times. He nearly won. Even G's done it 5 times. Kwiatkowski's kind of the big loss because he's done it 1,000,000 times. They had no choice in that matter. Little Trek.
He won it, right?
Kwiato, he played on Sagan's nervousness, beat him in the sprint with Alaphilippe 2017.
Loved it.
Little Trek, they bring Pedersen and Johnny Milan, as well as in the provisional Sturven, Simmons, who's looked very good actually, Jacopo Mosca, Kirsch, and Ciccone. The Ciccone one is beyond me. Where the fuck is Vácek?
He's not
here. Injured?
No.
He's not injured?
No, he's not injured.
I love getting mad at provisional start lists. Also, it's Thursday morning before the race on Saturday. We've left this as late as possible. We've still got half the things are provisional, but...
Ridiculous. I'm sorry. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, this is getting worse and worse every year from the teams.
Yeah, it's like it's a day before they're like, oh, here's the start list. I'm sorry, but...
It's a monument.
Think about the podcasters for a second.
But they also know. They also know. Like, all their riders are in Liguria.
Do they think it's some psychological warfare of like, if we leave it late, they might not expect Messi Pedersen on the start line?
It's so we don't criticize their team. No, I'm just going to get mad at the provision. I'm going to get mad at whatever PCS has guessed. I'm like, why is Giulio Ciccone in the Sanremo team, not Matthias Vácek?
Exactly. I agree.
Yeah. I think Milan is. I'm actually not so confident in him in Sanremo. I think it's all about Mads Pedersen. I think he's got a great chance to win, especially in
Why?
the rain.
Do you not believe that Milan can make it into Group 2?
He just in Sanremo just has dropped way earlier than I thought, and I think the explosive efforts really blunt his legs. Like Lucas saying Trek announced 2 minutes ago. All right, let me get mad
You
at
just
the
roasted
real
him
one.
for no reason then.
Well, maybe not. Maybe not.
The real question is Wozek in it?
Oh, it's not even. I have to then click on the web link and
Oh no.
just tell me the team list. I can't find it. I'm scrolling. Just tell me the riders.
There's so much text, man.
It's a full tech. I don't know what the team is, Benji.
So I don't know what the team is either. There's a long tag. Well, we'll just go with the PCS one.
Bruh, just put the list of. I don't think they have announced Luke.
Too long didn't read. I'm sorry. This is ridiculous. It's a wall of text. You think I've ever read an article of longer than 7 sentences in the last 2 years?
Just tell me, is Wozek going? And I don't think he is. We do like the people at Little Trek, by the way. We like.
Yeah.
They're very nice.
But their articles are too long.
Anyway, the Lotto bring a very strange team with no Van Gils and no De Lee because Van Gils left. So they don't really have maybe Jenno Bergmos to try to sneak a top 10 is possible. Moving to Q36.5, who have they got around Tom Pidcock? Where are they?
They are there. They've announced. Oh my god, Q36.5, I love you.
They're all about positioning. Zukovsky, who's been looking after Pidcock in recent races, Asparen, Fabio Christen, Emil Leipinge. They're just going to position Pidcock for as long as possible, and Milan Varda's there as sort of a wild card. Jaco Alula bring Michael Matthews second last year, supported by Schmidt, Sutlin, Zana de Preto Gampa. Viersma, Lisa Bike, Olav Koy is their leader. There's no Van Aert. They got no sort of leader punchy option a la Vanderpool, of course, or UAE. So it's really a pure sprinter. Olav Koy with Victor Campenaerts, Dan McLay, Ben Tullett, who was good in Torino yesterday, Walter van der Sande, and Axel Zangler as sort of the wild card. No idea what to expect.
I want to break you up for a second to talk about some of the riders you just mentioned. First of all, bring it back to Little Trek for a second. When it comes to Mads Pedersen, we've seen, in my opinion, a slight transition of the rider. Maybe it's not a transition that was meant to be, but his climbing is looking fantastic right now. His longer endurance effort looked fantastic. And then I look at his sprint and it was slightly reduced this year. A bit unimpressive. Like he beat a one-up sprint against Joshua Tarling in Paris, but that doesn't inspire me when it comes to MSR. Because the likelihood that a fastest sprinter is going to be in the group with him is seemingly pretty high. Now, I have the potential confidence that the Pedersen of the level we've seen in the last 2 weeks might be able to follow the first few riders on the climbs. But I just don't have that confidence in a sprint. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it hasn't looked particularly explosive, but if we do have rainy conditions, which are predicted for the weekend, if we do have, if it's a harder race overall, maybe that plays into
buff.
Yeah, it plays into his favor. And it's different. Like that end of that Paris stage was that was a very, very hard 90 minutes. But yeah, you're right, his sprint hasn't looked as good, and certainly against Jasper Philipsen or Olav Koy, there's no way I'd be taking him right now. Even Sam Bennett looks way faster. Like Bennett in Tirreno was fast. Not that he necessarily makes this finish. I
would even dare to say that, like, if we compare Gunnar compared to other sprinters in the potential group, I would dare to pick Gunnar over Pedersen in a small group at the moment.
Yeah, they look similar. I mean, and you think if Gunnar had been in Tarling's position, I mean, if Sam Watson had been in Tarling's position, he would have won that sprint in Paris-Nice. So, yeah, certainly he might be Pedersen might be wanting to be aggressive to go with a very small group.
Should Gunnar be scared of Pogacar in a sprint? I don't think so.
No.
Van der Poel, it depends on the starting speed of the sprint, I think.
Yeah, it depends. Depends. Decathlon, I already mentioned, they bring Sam Bennett, Victor Lefay, Oliver Narsson, who's been second in this race, and Aurelien Paripintre, as well as Pierre Gautrat. So a lot of punchy guys and one sprinter. Bahrain, former winner Moric with Caruso, Nick Yasant, Kamil Gradek, Milovic, Stannard, and Zambanini. So they obviously want to go solo again with Moric. Intermarché Bini, who in theory should be very good at this race. Vito Breit, Francesco Bussato, Tom Paquot. Lawrence Rex, Jonas Rucci was very strong in yesterday in Torino, and Dion Smith. Like, I'm not sure you can drop Jonas Rucci on the Cipressa. Dead set.
I disagree.
Jonas Rucci is flying.
I don't believe in it. He was solid at Milano-Torino. I give you that on the first to Vega, but I'm not having this.
I think Jonas Rucci might be the best ruler in the world.
Okay.
Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe bring Maxim Van Gils, Roger Adria, Jonas Koch, Gianni Moscon, Ryan Mullen, Lawrence Pithy. They don't really have like a sprinter, so they clearly want to get Van Gils in a group with, they might have 3 in 12 or 3 riders in 10. Like Adria looks so good. Pithy's a positioning god. Pithy's their sprint option, of course. Van Gils should be able to follow. He look good. So they have a good, well-balanced team.
Is a positioning god's the definite, like the synonym of someone that is very good at fighting for position?
Yeah. I mean,
physically,
no one gets any. There's no yellow cards issued before the Cipressa and Poggio. The commissaires aren't watching then. So
probably true, actually. They do have like a Twitter open in their commissaire bus, so as long as nobody snitches, there's no yellow cards before the Cipressa.
True. Soudal Quickstep, no Paul Manier, I don't believe, because he's had an injury or crash recently, which is really a shame for them. So they're kind of, their provisional team, I just don't see how they can be competitive. They have Catania, Cherney, Enkhorn, Casper Pedersen, Schachmann, Sverchek. Tudor, there's no sprinter, no puncher.
Schachmann, I see maybe getting over the Poggio in like second group and then trying to go for a flyer if it comes back together, which that's possible, but I don't see Schachmann winning that way.
No.
And like the other riders you said, with Olaf Koy, I don't necessarily have the same confidence as I had with Philipsen pre-crash of making that second group, because he's not as versatile as a Philipsen in the last couple of weeks. That's my opinion. Then Lawrence Pithy, I believe he can make that second group, but then what is the likelihood that a better sprinter will be in that group? It's quite high. And this year I haven't been super confident in Pithy either. Can he top 5 this race? Yes, 100%. Pithy I put on the same level as Matthews perhaps, and maybe that's underrating Matthews, because Matthews has been super consistent in this race.
Yeah, there's also experience. Like Matthews has done this race 1,000,000 times. He lives here, so he's done this.
He knows the barriers.
He knows everything. Yeah, he knows even it is actually really important, like, to know when the peloton will close to one side before a corner so that you don't get boxed in.
Yeah.
It's stuff like that's so important on the Poggio. Last year, Pogacar saw Van der Poel go to the left side, and he saw that the peloton or the riders ahead were moving to his left, and that Van der Poel was about to get boxed, and he started attacking in the saddle, his second attack, before even Van der Poel was boxed in, and then by the time he was up to speed, Van der Poel was boxed. That's how he got the initial gap that Van der Poel had to react to on top of Poggio, because Pogacar actually had a second and a half on top of Poggio. Tudor bring Alaphilippe, Haller, Kellerman, Leinhard, Meyerhofer, Rick Plomers, Matteo Trentin. I mean, I think we've got to start talking about Tudor Pro Cycling a little bit more seriously, particularly in races like this, because Trentin's so experienced in this race. He's the one that lost the wheel to Poggi a few years ago. Alaphilippe's won. Haller, I think, has been good here before, like at least entering Poggio in good position.
And
Rick Plomers is going to win, according to Luke.
True. Plymers are actually, like, if you look at Muscat Classic and a 2-stage in Tirreno where he was good, they look like MSR if you squint a little bit. But that being said, last year on the Poggio, who was the team in best position? Tudor Pro Cycling.
Yeah, they were. They entered Poggio in first position last year. So, like, they look really, really good at the moment. All around the races, they look like a World Tour level team. And
wow. Depends on which one you look at.
What's a World? Yeah, exactly. What's a World Tour team?
They're better than RK at the moment.
UnoX, Magnus Cort, Jonas Abrahamsson, Versnes, who just won in Tirreno, the Johannesson brothers, who actually were in very good shape yesterday, Andreas Krohn, it's quite a good team. They were going for Magnus Cort, I dare say. Johannesson, I'd like to see.
Oh,
They'll be hoping Tobias Johannesson fulfills his potential and is following the best punchers on Poggio.
I need Jonas Abrahamsson in the breakaway.
Why not? XTS Astana, with their inexorable rise this year. Ballerini Bettiol, Fedorov Turnisa, Ulisi Velasco Vinokurov. I think Bettiol's their best option, not sure of his shape. But Astana flying. I did Jayco. Israel, Ackerman, Clark, Frigo, Louvel, Sheehan, Strong. Are we hoping for a sprint with Strong or Sheehan?
Sheehan's out, no? I swear I saw a tweet the other day that Sheehan might be out for a race. Might have been Torino.
No, he didn't start yesterday.
Okay. Could be wrong, though.
EF Education, Easy Post, Paulus Albanese, McKellar, Honore, Sweeney, Mickles, Max Walker. See if Albanese maybe could go for a sprint, or Paulus and Honore can follow. Covidus, Aaron Baru, Lastra, Mars, Maudo, Orsolin, Samitier, Damien, Touze. Aaron Baru, of course. Benji will be cheering for. And then Arcade B&B Hotels, Kevin Vocola, Anthony Delaplace, Garcia Piana, Ganlek Brothers, Martin Schotta, and Alessandro Ver.
It's a bit hard to cheer for Cofidis after reading that article yesterday, but we'll get into that in the weekly.
Yeah, true. That's all the riders. That's all the starters. Prediction time, Benji. I think with the wet conditions, the descent becomes even more important. You got to remember, if Van der Poel and Pidcock weren't on it on the descent last year, Pogacar maybe wins solo. Maybe not. Yeah. Then probably Van der Poel just pulls him back on the flat, but you never know.
To me, it felt like Van der Poel already kind of closed him like in the first little bit of the descent, just over the top. Well, Pidcock was the real one to me, where he bridged from that second group where Gunnar was in first position and Pidcock went past him. Pidcock flew towards the first two in the descent. So Pidcock is the Poggio descent king for me. Van der Poel's also really good at it, to be clear. Pogacar's worse at it than those two. Ganna's last in line. But we got to keep in mind, Ganna did puncture last year. So are we overjudging last year, or do we... It's still not his skill.
No, they can Pidcock, if he's with them, he can drop Ganna on the descent straight up, especially if it's wet.
Yeah.
So, yeah, unfortunately, I think we're going to see guys pushing the descent. And it's even Pogacar, I think. The descent for Pogacar, I think, is his biggest chance to win. If he gets a surprise attack at the top of Poggio, gets a small gap, Van der Poel messes it up, Pidcock's blocked, I think the descent's his best chance to win.
There's quite a few riders that have to be blocked and mess up.
Well, last year it nearly happened.
Van der Poel, to be honest, it looked like he had everything under control in that move towards Pogacar.
I think Van der Poel was fucked.
Really?
At the top of Poggio, I think, and following Poggi and Poggi sprinting out, I think he was fucked.
I never really lost the confidence that he would close it, to be honest. And that's also the thing, like, that was when he was out of position. That was the worst case scenario, when he was slightly blocked in. The perfect moment for Pogacar to attack. I don't think a surprise attack is possible for Pogacar. It's more about being able to attack when other riders are blocked and in bad position, but then will every single one of the other riders be out of position? No,
probably not. But I'm telling you, it takes one Pippo Ganna to... Because if you have one... It's not so easy that you just pass a guy. It's like, Ganna, right, he'll sprint out of the corner, so you can't pass him on the straight. It's like when you're on a motorway. Oh, no, sorry. You're driving... When you're driving back from... on up a mountain to Andorra.
What is this?
You're on a single lane road, you can't overtake, and there's like people driving 20 k's below the speed limit in front of you. They then get to the overtaking section and they start going 20 kilometers an hour over the speed limit, and it's difficult to pass them. That's Pippo Ganna on the descent of the Poggio. Like, he's actually very fast on the straight section, so it's when you're trying to pass him, you have to dive bomb him in the next corner. So I'm just saying, Poggi on the descent, I think Poggi's going to push the descent, and that's where he thinks he can win.
I don't believe he can make the difference on the descent when Pidcock and Van der Poel are in the group. They are, in my opinion, significantly better descenders.
True. So what I see happening is I see a sprint of 12 riders, 10 to 15 riders again, actually.
Ooh.
That's what I see. I think the favourites will nullify each other. I think I don't trust Ganna's racecraft to time his attack on the Via Roma, or if he goes where Sturven went. I think there'll be guys like Pidcock and Morich and who will attack. I think they'll get closed down, and that maybe that's not true. Maybe without Van der Poel last year, an attacker can win. Actually, yeah, I think it's going to be a group of 12 at the bottom of the Poggio descent, and I'm changing my mind. I think an attacker will win. Let me pick the attacker, Benji.
Okay.
I go with Pidcock. I think Pidcock wins.
In what way? Because last year, because Pidcock's sprint is not good enough to trust your sprint in the group.
He'll attack.
So he'll want to attack, but then last year, didn't he say he fucked up with his attack or something?
No, his attack was good. He got unlucky that Van der Poel was so committed to Phillips. And if you have a normal rider chasing for their sprinter, like Axel Zangler or Ben, if you have Maxim Van Heel, Ben Tullett chasing for Coy or Van Giels for Pithy, it's not. I think he maybe wins, but it was Van der Poel.
You said what you think believe will happen. I want to say what I want to see happen. I feel like as like a spectacle for a second. I would like to see a 4-5 man group go over the top of the Poggio in the descent. There might the second group will definitely be chasing. The fast group will also be pushing a little in the descent, to be honest. So it's more about what happens on the flat afterwards and whether that comes together. And then if you look at the composition of the group, if Van der Poel, Pogacar are in the group, if Ganna's in the group, Pedersen, like Pidcock, those five, who of those five ride?
Ganna?
Does Pogacar not ride?
I guess he does, yeah. I guess if everyone else is contributing, yeah, he will.
Should he though?
Yeah.
Because like his sprint is worse than most people in that group.
What else
should
he not
do? Want it to come back together and then go for a late attack if possible?
Maybe, yeah.
Like at that point, his race is mostly lost anyway.
It's
but
too risky to let big groups come back because then there's also domestiques to control for a sprinter.
True.
I think he's going to go on the descent. It's a tricky race to win. I think that's why Peter Sagan, despite being the best rider physically for this race for best part of a decade, never won it.
Yeah.
And also when you got the world champions bands on and you're the hot favorite, it's even harder to win. It really is. They're just all going to be looking at Pogacar, which is also natural. So I pick Pidcock. Who are you picking?
I'm going to be boring. For me, it's Van der Poel.
Let's pick a random rider who, when they top 10, we say, of course they top 10. They got the experience and guile in Sanremo. Who's like a random Sanremo top 10 specialist?
I was going to say Rick Plymers, but he's not a specialist and doesn't have the experience.
Plymers not a bad option.
Let me cook. I'm going to take a look for a second at the previous years.
I've picked mine, Francesco Bussato.
The experience. The boy's 20, probably. What do you mean experience?
Ruja Adria can't wait to come 8th in this race.
Can't believe Turgi is not riding this race.
Is
Total not invited? That might be the reason, to be honest.
Seems not, yeah.
Kro Andersen would have top 10'd, but that ain't happening. Mohoric has been in the top 10 most years. Paulus, that's not random enough. I'm going for Simon Clark.
Simon Clark, top 10, there we go.
I don't believe in it, by the way. I think he's kind of washed.
Onto the women's Sanremo, now Milano-Sanremo Donne. It starts in Genoa, not Milan, 156 kilometers long and with no Passo Turchino, but exactly the same final 60 kilometers with the 3 Capo, including the last Capo Berta 2K 6.3%, then the Cipressa, then the Poggio di Sanremo. Exact same finish, same day, and same weather conditions, light rain as well as a tailwind along the coast, and then a crosswind / some headwind on the Poggio. The heavy favorite. Well, let me go to the favorites actually, Benji.
I'm very curious.
Lotte Kopecki's favourite at $3. Her teammate is second favourite. Lorena Wiebes $5. Demi Vollering third at $6. Voss $8. Balsamo, who just won Binder, $13. Elisa Longo Borghini $15. Chloe Dygert, very short actually. She's seventh favourite, $26. Kat Ferguson $26. Puck Peterson $29. Kristen Faulkner $34. Blanca Vash $34. Sylvia Persko $41. Noemi Rouge $41. Wollaston $51. Lippert $51, PFP $67, Lebu $67, Kerbal $67, Paternoster $81, Lacourt $81, Neviadoma $81, Henderson $81. Consoni is the last I'll mention at 100 to 1. So actually seems a little bit more of a midfield here compared to the men's.
I gotta say, I think the first question we need to ask, and a question that has been discussed by multiple sports directors in the last week in different media channels, is how selective do we expect the women's race to be on the Cipressa and the Poggio, and even on the Capi, for example? Because gotta say, even the last Capi, Capoberta, is 1.9-ish kilometers, 6%. It's the highest gradient we've seen in this entire race. Like, not entirely, but you know what I mean, right? It's actually not a super easy climb either. And then I start thinking about, okay, I've seen Trofeo Binda last week. That race is harder. There's multiple iterations of climbs, including a harder climb throughout that parcours, and it ends up in a sprint that Balsamo wins. Then I look at Sanremo, there's only really 2.5 climbs here, or 2 climbs maybe, or 1.5, depending on how you count these climbs. But then my question is, does the repetitiveness of the climbing in Trofeo Binda make the eventual climb where the leaders launch less explosive than a potential MSR where the running is slower up to the Cipressa? Does that make it a bit more explosive for potential gaps to be created? But then again, there's less fatigue, so will there be less gaps as a consequence of that? It's a difficult analysis here, I feel like.
They what was I going to say?
I don't know. I'd like to know.
Oh, I remembered. It's half the aggregate climbing. Half the aggregate climbing in Sanremo compared to Trofeo Binda, and that was won by a sprinter, Elisa Balsamo. So they're steeper climbs. The attrition of it, I think, outweighs maybe the... I think the Sanremo parcours fits Wiebes and Kopecky perfectly. That's why they're the first and second favourites, because they can do that one explosive effort. The stage that Lotte Kopecky won in the Tour de France 2 years ago, the opening stage, I think, was like one climb at 5%, 2Ks or so. She rode away. Wiebes made the group that sprinted behind. And so that's the... I really think it's difficult for Vollering, and she's in the Pogacar position where she's looked at by everybody. She's the heavy favourite. She's got a very strong team. She was the strongest uphill in Binder, but it's a flat finish. It's not that hard a race. And she can't win a sprint against Kopecky or Wiebes in a group or head-to-head.
I agree with you fully. The added factor, though, is that FDJ Suez, if they look at this parcours, they're going to be like, okay, we need to make this race as hard as possible. So that's not just Cipressa and Poggio. That's also, in my opinion, the Capi, trying to hard pace the Capi to make it harder. Going through their domestiques, doing so, and then seeing on Cipressa and Poggio when you make your move, if you're voting, for example. Now, can I be honest? I agree. For me, Kopecky is the favorite. Looking at the parcours, I don't know her form because we haven't seen her all year. She's been on the mountain. I do expect her form to be good going into this race, so I'm seeing her as the favorite as a consequence of that. She's got the better flat sprint over Vollering, like you mentioned. Is there a chance that if the Jesus spacing leads to Wiebes being dropped? Yes, but Wiebes has been quite versatile over the last 2 years, so it won't be super easy to drop Wiebes either. Now, when I think about the potential scenarios that could occur, is it me, or do I feel like this year SD Works has lined up Van der Breggen there, Wiebes there, Kopecky here with Wiebes, but never really all three, obviously, because Kopecky hasn't ridden yet. But if Anna van der Breggen is added to this race, this is dead set SD Works for me.
Yeah, she's not on the provisional, which is surprising. They do have Marta Luck here, who just won in Knockout yesterday in an uphill
Yeah.
sprint. Blanca Vash has been in very good shape. She was second in Binder in the sprint. Cecchini and Charitza can position. So they got a really well balanced team actually, and they have the strongest team for this race. FDJ do have sort of a sprinter in Ali Wollaston, but do you trust Wollaston against Wiebes? Like, is Wollaston going to make
surviving.
A group that? Yeah, she's probably not surviving, and if she does, then of course Wiebes is there too. They have Lebu, Gvazzini, Argeist, and Vigilia, but like the firepower of SD Works is better. It just
to me, it's
like
a mistake to bring Wollaston in the first place. Like, if your leader is voting, let's be honest, their leader is voting, even with Wollaston there. Like, yeah, their argument is probably she's the backup in case it becomes a sprint. But at the end of the day, you need to go all in if you want Vollering to win this race. You need every mountain domestique you can. You need every.
Then you should bring Shabby.
Yeah, or even Labu.
She's on the provisional.
Oh, okay, never mind. Well, okay. Just in general, like, I would like to see full support for Vollering to make this race as hard as possible. And I don't think Wollaston adds to that as much as some of the other teammates that aren't selected. Like you said, Shabby.
I would leave Wollaston in, and then I would take out Vigilia and put in Shabby. And then you do a proper lead out on Poggio with Lebu and Shabby. Maybe you get lucky and get separation. But still, yeah, I don't see it. Canyon Strambring, Nivea Doma, who should be good for this race. Consola, she crashed recently. Wow, she's recovered from Strada crash. Consoni, Tiff Cromwell, Chloe Dygert, Ludwig, Skalniak Soika, who's very good. So they have a sprinter in Consoni, they have an attacker, Ganna style in Dygert, they have a puncher in Nivea Doma, and they got sort of all-rounders in Ludwig and Skalniak Soika and Cromwell to pace. So it's a balanced team.
Are you most confident in?
Nivea Doma.
Really? For me, it's Dygert.
Dygert on the wet Poggio descent.
That is the one danger. I even messaged you before this podcast. That is the danger, that descent for Dygert. But I feel like I still have more confidence in that, in a potential chance for victory than Nivea Doma. Because Nivea Doma can't get away on this parkour and she can't sprint.
Yeah,
so she can't win this race.
She can't win, but I expect her to come fifth. Or something. AG Insurance, Khira, Zigart, Pina, Manley, Massetti, Mullman. Pinar's their all-rounder. Probably should get their best result. Manley can sprint if she survives it. EF Education, Oatley, Kristen Faulkner, the Olympic champion, Letizia Borghese, Kadzal, Rook, who's very fast, Kerbal, Valier. So they got a descending demon in Kerbal. They've got a really good reduced bunch sprinter in Rook, who's actually very, I don't know how you drop her here either. Like, and then they have Faulkner as the maybe attacker. Are we looking at this? Sorry, I'll do Trek and Movistar, and then I'll run through the teams quickly. Balsamo sprinting for Little Trek. I think they're all in on that. Van Anrooy makes her return though this weekend, so they do have a puncher. Movistar got Lippert, Baril, and Ferguson as their leaders. I think they all think they're the leader, and that's how that will work. They should be all in for Ferguson, by the way.
I agree.
Like, really.
It's ridiculous in some sense because she's super young, but you mentioned it last time. You mentioned it numerous times already. She is a generational talent. She is your golden goose. Is that a word? No, it is.
Yeah.
She's the golden goose of Movistar right now. So you got to put your money where your golden goose is. And in MSR, they got to go for Ferguson, in my opinion. Lippert has no chance to win this race, in my opinion. Ferguson can win this race in certain scenarios.
Like, Ferguson started a sprint a million miles out in Binder and still came third after a harder race. I think a flat sprint is really, really good.
Is she versatile enough to follow Kopecky if she goes nuclear on a Poggio?
Nah, don't think so, not yet.
Okay.
But we'll see. We'll see. Visma, Lisa Bike, bring Mariana Vos, Victoria Kladnova, De Vries, Pauline Ferron-Prevot, Imogen Wolf. They're the only ones on the provisional, so there'll be, that's 5, so there'll be an extra rider as well. So they got Vos in a reduced bunch sprint. She looked good in Binder, but then cracked in the last climb. Ferron-Prevot lives in the area, so she'll know the descent well and her handling until the crash in Strade, or she's willing to push it at least.
Yeah.
Um,
I've got some confidence in Vos. I gotta
Me
say,
too,
after
yeah.
Binda, the way she followed that Lamborghini attack, yes, she cracked in the process later on in the race, but I'm sorry, you don't need to do that 10 times in Milano-Sanremo, that effort. It's only a couple of climbs. So that's the difference with Binda. There were constant attacks and Vos had to follow multiple. I don't expect her to have to follow multiple in terms of Milano-Sanremo. And the way she was so strong in Binda, I think Vos might be underrated. I think she's a bigger favorite than Vollering. I think Vollering is not a top 3 favorite here.
I agree. Vollering's explosivity's not looked so devastating to me, especially on even 6-7% people have been able to follow her. It's her threshold, which is what is unbelievable. UAE, the last big team, bring Elisa Longoborghini obviously as their leader with other riders like Squiban, Persico, Gasparini, Ameliusic, and Holden around her. Picnic, Cavallis look good. Barali, Georgi, Yastrab, Koch, Ninkavinka. They've got Pfeiffer, Georgi in a small group sprint, go for the podium. Uno X, Confalinieri, Alarud, Barker, Boilard, Gasquien, Otterstad. Otterstad, actually, she should survive the climb. Same with Ingvild, Gasquien, and they can go for a sprint. Livalula, Jaco, Mavi Garcia's in great shape. Same with Paternoster. So Paternoster was 5th in Binder in a much harder race. She's Italian. Roseman, Gannon, Schmulders, Quinty Ton, Trinka Colonel. Jaco got, I reckon, top 4 strongest team in this race, actually. What I don't understand is Schmulders, Roseman, Gannon, and Paternoster are all sprinters, so how that will work.
Smollett is a bit more versatile, right? Wasn't she on Tour Down Under very...
Yeah, she was 2nd on Willunga Hill, 10th in Strada Bianca, so probably they got a really good team for this race. Like, that team is really, really strong.
Yeah. I've got a complete outsider.
Oh, yeah?
A super dark horse that is not going to win this race, but I would like to see her result at the end. Eline Janssen on Volker Wessels. She's 23. She was 17th in Omloop. And last year she was topped in so many races throughout the season. And I'm talking even like 10th in a relatively versatile stage that Vos ended up winning at Vuelta España, for example, the Vuelta Femenina. So it wouldn't shock me if she shows up in the top 15 after this race.
Could be. She's improving fast. We also have Cofidis with Koffenberg as maybe their leader. Phoenix de Koenig have Castelline, Puck Peterson, Royak as Christina Schweinberger as sort of all options, but I don't see how they win a sprint really, except maybe, it's going to be difficult. I think, to have to go solo with Peterson. And that's the main teams, I would say. I think I've done most of the main teams. I'll be honest, I think Kopecky just wins. I really do. I think SD Works can control the Poggio and they can whittle it down, and then Kopecky can go solo, and I don't think Demi can. The only thing giving me pause is that Demi's an excellent descender. We saw in Binder, she was putting people on gaps in the descent. So I think Demi, the descent helps, but it's a good descent if you're the most powerful rider. If you can sprint out of every corner the hardest, you can't get brought back. And so that's why Kopecky, even if technically Vollering has an edge, Kopecky sprinting out of every... I'm also not sure about that, but I think Kopecky's power will make the difference on the Poggio descent if there's a gap already.
I agree that Vollering's descending is top-notch, but when it comes to technique, I don't know if it's like 100% technique, you know? Because like Kopecky does have the saga cross history, etc. So she should not be shit at descending the Poggio either. So I don't expect the difference to be made in the descent here, while I agree with you that Vollering is a great descender. But we got to get to our picks soon, huh? Like, I'm looking at the start list, and there's a few interesting names. And what are the odds that you're going to pick Kat Ferguson?
No, I picked Kopecky.
Okay.
Should have Weber's in the group behind. I think it's going to be Kopecky, Weber's, Ferguson podium.
Kopecky, Weavers, Ferguson. So 1-2 for SD Works. Ooh.
Actually, no, that's respect Marianne Vos. Kopecky, Weber's, Vos.
I'm going to go Vos, Ferguson and Kopecky.
How's that happened? Kopecky gets caught and then her sprint's not as...
I'm losing
Kopecky
my
doesn't want to
passport.
sprint, right?
Oh, we need to balance the podcast a little. You're
True,
going
yeah.
pro-Belgian, so I'm going anti-Belgian here.
But yeah, Kopecky really doesn't want to sprint.
Depends on who she's with. I believe Vos on a flat sprint is faster than Kopecky.
Yeah. So
Ferguson, I don't know. I don't think so necessarily, but we don't
not
know
her
her
ideal
ceiling.
situation.
Yeah. And I just want to see Ferguson top 3 because it's epic to see a youngster show up and beat the odds, you know?
Yeah. I think
That's completely biased.
Kopecky wants to be solo. I think she wants to be solo, or at worst, she wants to be with just someone like Demi Vollering or Kasia Niewiadoma, who she knows she can dust in a sprint.
Yeah.
And then you have Wiebes mucking up the chase behind. But I can't wait to watch it because we've also looked at this, I would say, through a very men's history lens.
Yeah.
Where there's a quickening of pace into the Cipressa, where there's an explosion on the Poggio, and where there's a cat and mouse game, no pun intended, in the Poggio descent and final.
Because
that's not necessarily what might happen.
What are the odds that a 15-women group with Femke Gerritsen for his D-word goes up the road and the peloton does not want to start chasing, so we see the breakaway fight for MSR?
We know that the peloton, I'm just telling you, the peloton in the women's peloton can behave very unpredictably, and especially with a parcours with no history where they know, okay, if we start to pace at this moment, we can bring back this time gap. They have no benchmark of that. Then you have Kopecky from the mountain, Demi, different teams. You're the favorite. No, you're the favorite. No, you pace. Omloop, Lotte Klaes won, not by 30 seconds, by a huge margin. Omloop, opening weekend. Biggest World Tour Classic of the year to date. Sanremo. I mean, also, the Capo climbs are much harder for the women relatively than the men. They do them at a lower speed. Therefore, the Capo Berta is 2Ks at 6.5%. There could be a tax on Capo Berta already. Riders trying to get ahead of the race. So, with 35Ks to go. So it could be a completely different race, not the way it just happens in the men's every year.
What if, for example, the Cipressa is super selective in like a group of 20 shows up after that? Like it bins 80% of the peloton and Dijkert anticipates the Poggio.
Yeah, that is what really could happen. And that is what, if you're Dijkert and Kristen Faulkner, you are hoping for. You want to turn this, as we said for Poggi, you want to turn this into a 30-minute effort with no fight for position and a pause behind. And you're going to lose something on the descent too. Faulkner and Dijkert need to anticipate from a group of 20, and who's going to react?
I'm going to change my pick. Can I? Am I allowed?
You're allowed.
My gut has been shouting Dijkert for the whole morning. And I know the Poggio descent sucks for her. But my gut is usually wrong, but still, I'm gonna go Dijkert ahead of someone, ahead of like a group sprint.
I mean, if she takes enough time into the descent, she might not. She can lose a bit. So,
how much time does she lose in the descent of the Poggio?
Oh, fuckload, man.
Half a minute.
No, actually, that's not. I think she'll push it at a good pace, or crash. I don't think she's like if she's going for a monument. I don't think she's going to descend as slowly. She's also powerful out of the corners, so
true.
Yeah, I really think it could be a much more different race than we think, and that's, now that I think about it, anticipating after Cipressa, that's the play if you're a rider like that.
And best of all, we don't have to watch 7 hours of flat before the Cipressa and the men's race. We can watch the women's race.
You also don't have to watch that. I mean, I never understood the people that complain Milano-Sanremo is so boring. You know, every year nothing happens for the Capo Berta or the Cipressa. I'm like, well, yeah, you know, so you don't have to watch it then. You just tune in at the first Capo. That's who put a gun to your head to sit on the couch.
Wait, Patrick. Do we not follow the first 6 hours of Milano-Sanremo to keep track of many seconds that Jacopo Mosca is reeling at the front?
I've never watched a minute of Sanremo before, even like the second Capo.
What are the odds Little Trek puts Mosca at the front in the men's race to help the other two teams like last year?
They put Vacek to pace.
They'll bring him over to pace. That's what Chicone is here.
Anyway, what was your podium?
I don't remember. Dijgaard, Vos, Ferguson, Kopecky is my top 4.
Fair enough. I think it's going to be a great race. All the stars. Can't wait to watch the first edition. And as Benji said, it fills your Saturday out very nicely with both races on. Hope you enjoyed the preview of Milano-Sanremo and Milano-Sanremo Donna. We'll have the recap of both races on Saturday after the race. And then we'll see you then. Till then, ciao.